Councilor Kushmerek, would you please lead us in the salute to the flag?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll take attendance. Councilor Boschman.
Present.
Councilor Clark.
Here.
Councilor Di Natale.
Here.
Councilor Donnelly.
Here.
Councilor Fleming.
Here.
Councilor Green.
Here.
Councilor Caddy.
Here.
Councilor Kushmerek.
Present.
Councilor Squalia.
Present.
Councilor Walsh.
Here.
Councilor Zarella.
Here.
I'm going to read the warrant for the organizational meeting. Organizational meeting of the 2019 City Council will be held Monday, January 7th, 2019, 10 a.m., Fitchburg Police Department Community Room, 20 Elm Street. The meeting is called for the following purposes: election of the council president for the year 2019, election of the council vice president for the year 2019, order adopting rules of the city council, order setting dates of regular meetings of the city council. And additionally, councilors, I sent you an email yesterday. The last item on the agenda, the drawing of names for seat assignment, should actually not have appeared as you changed that rule last year. Currently, seat assignments are made by the president, so I ask that you would not address that matter on the agenda. So first on the agenda is the election of the council president for the year 2019. I declare nominations open for council president. Councilor Green.
Yes, I'd like to nominate again Michael Kushmerek for president, please.
Second. Move nomination to close. Second.
There's a motion and second to close nominations. That is a roll call vote to close nominations. So this is just to close. Councilor Boschman?
That would be yes.
Councilor Clark?
Close.
Councilor Di Natale?
Yes.
Councilor Donnelly?
Yes.
Councilor Fleming?
Yes.
Councilor Green?
Yes.
Councilor Caddy?
Yes.
Councilor Kushmerek?
Yes.
Councilor Squalia?
No.
Councilor Walsh?
Yes.
Councilor Zarella?
Yes.
Okay, nominations are closed. We will take a roll call vote for council president. The individuals nominated are Councilor Michael Kushmerek. This is a roll call vote. So this time, after I call your name, please state the councilor for whom you are voting. Councilor Boschman.
Councilor Kushmerek.
Councilor Clark.
Councilor Kushmerek.
Councilor Di Natale.
Kushmerek.
Councilor Donnelly.
Councilor Kushmerek.
Councilor Fleming.
Councilor Kushmerek.
Councilor Green.
Councilor Kushmerek.
Councilor Caddy.
Kushmerek.
Councilor Kushmerek.
Councilor Kushmerek.
Councilor Squalia.
Can I abstain
No.
from?
No, you must vote.
Must I choose only Kushmerek because we only have one vote, one choice, or can I choose another name?
There is only one name in nomination at this time, Councilor.
So Councilor Kushmerek.
Councilor Walsh.
Councilor Kushmerek.
Councilor Zarella.
Councilor Kushmerek.
It is unanimous. Councilor Kushmerek is president for the year 2019.
Councilors, I just want to take the opportunity and thank each and every one of you for your support, not only this year in the year 2019, but also for the past several years. It's been a true honor, and I know that's a cliche phrase to use. I'm honored and humbled to get your support, but I really mean it. It's been 3 years of learning, and for me, and there isn't a day that goes by in this role that I haven't learned something new, and there isn't a day as a counselor that I haven't continued to learn something new about our city, about this body, and about opportunities for this city moving forward. And that's my promise that I'll make to you. I'm going to continue to learn. I'm going to continue to keep the phone line and the lines of communication open. No one's perfect, and I certainly don't profess to be. I know I've made mistakes as a counselor and in this role, and I invite the opportunity for counselors to engage me, one-on-one about ways that I can improve, both as a counselor, as a person, and as a president of this body. I'm president of the council, but I'm truly just another counselor, and we're all here to improve this body and improve this city, and I mean that. So invite each of you, on an ongoing basis to have that dialogue with me about where we can improve. And I look forward to what the year 2019 holds for us and for the city of Fitchburg. So thank you again for your support. Next on the agenda, we have the election of the council vice president for the year 2019. I declare nominations open for council vice president.
Move to nominate Amy Green. Second.
I have a motion and second to nominate Councilor Amy Green.
Move nominations be closed. Second.
I have a motion and second to close nominations. We'll now do a roll call vote to close.
Councilor Boishman?
I vote yes, no, Amy Green.
This is to close nominations.
Sorry. Close, yes,
Councilor Clark?
to close.
Councilor Di Natale?
Yes.
Councilor Donnelly?
Yes.
Councilor Fleming?
Yes.
Councilor Green?
Yes.
Councilor Caddy?
Yes.
Councilor Kushmarek?
Yes.
Councilor Squalia?
Yes.
Councilor Walsh?
Yes.
Councilor Zarella?
Yes.
Nominations are now closed. When the clerk calls on you, please state the name of the counselor that you are electing for vice president.
Councilor Boishman?
Councilor Amy Green.
Councilor Clark?
Amy Green.
Councilor Di Natale?
Green.
Councilor Donnelly?
Green.
Councilor Fleming?
Councilor Green?
Councilor Green? Green. Councilor Caddy?
Green.
Councilor Kushmarek?
Councilor Green.
Councilor Squalia?
Counselor Green.
Councilor Walsh?
Counselor Green.
Councilor Zarella?
Councilor Green.
It is unanimous. Councilor Green is elected.
Congratulations, Councilor Green. All right. Next on the agenda is Order 1, 2019, order adopting rules of the City Council for the year 2019.
Move to amend the rules.
Second.
I have a motion and second to amend the rules. Speaking on the motion,
Yes, I would like to amend Rule 1A, for the president shall be elected annually, to the president shall be elected annually, not to serve for more than 2 consecutive years. I would also like to amend Rule 29 to read, seats in the council chamber for the members thereof shall be
do
determined
we want them
by
individually?
random order, drawing out names out of a hat. I would also like to amend Rule 33, that Rule 33 be stricken completely. The serving and the members of the city council and city employees shall dress in business attire. That's all.
So I have a motion to amend, and then perhaps we take these individually, Madam Clerk. Would that be your recommendation as well?
It would.
Okay. So I have a motion and second to amend. All those in favor of amending? Just opening up to it. So let's just take these individually, Counselor. So you're proposing a rule change to 1A. Would you state the language for your
The
amendment?
president shall be elected annually, not to serve for more than 2 consecutive years. This is how they do it in Leominster City Council.
So I have a motion. I do not have a second. All right, Counselor, your next motion.
29. For seats in the council chamber to be determined by random lot.
I second it.
I have a motion and second to determine seats by random lot. Speaking on the motion, Counselors, I'm comfortable either way. It's the will of this body, and I'm happy to abide by the wishes of this body. Speaking on the motion, Counselor Donnelly.
I wasn't here, thank you, Mr. President. I wasn't here when it was voted on. I understand that, it's interesting to strategize and put people where you want, but I like the vibrancy of random. I mean, sometimes it perks things up. I know in industry, sometimes you keep moving people around, you get a little different dynamic. I think that people, if you have a pick that you don't like, you can try and randomly exchange with somebody else if you wish. Just a suggestion, I'm only one person.
Counselor Caddy.
I agree with Councilor Donnelly. However, I don't remember what year it was, but I can remember one year, there were 4 or 5 new councilors, and they were all sitting next to each other on the other side of the room. And for the council president to have the ability to make sure that there's someone with experience sitting next to someone who just got there, I think it's very advantageous for the council.
Counselor Di Natale.
The other reason why we changed it was because when we were drawing them out randomly out of a hat, more often than not, councils would just swap with people. So it kind of negated the randomness, as Councilor Donnelly mentioned, of changing things up. That we would have almost half the council switch seats, which kind of made me say, why are we picking out of a hat then? You pick out of a hat, you stick with what you picked. You don't start swapping seats with everybody, which is why we decided just let the president seat us accordingly and not even go through it. Thank you.
Counselor Squelly.
I'd like to amend my motion to be by random lot or adjusted at the discretion of the president.
Do I have a second, Counselor Bosch?
I don't want to amend that lot. I want to keep it the same.
The motion to amend fails. Counselor Zarella.
Speaking on the original motion, we just changed this last year for exactly the reasons Councilor Caddy just outlined, in terms of making sure that the 4 of us who were freshman councilors would all have at least one experienced councilor seated next to us. Obviously, this particular year, that is no longer so much of an issue. We've had a year to get used to everything, but it's an election year again, and I think that if we're going to go through cycles of amending this rule each time we have a new council, that's going to get very tiresome very fast. And I've seen no problem with the way our president has assigned the seats so far, so.
Counselor Di
I would be
Natale.
amenable to changing the rule if we do not allow us to switch seats. Just because there's no reason, if you're doing a random selection, we shouldn't be allowed to switch seats with everybody afterwards. What's the point of it? So if you're going to change the rule back to the way it was, it should clearly state councilors cannot swap seats. What you pick is where you sit. I mean, I don't care what we do, honestly. But I like the way we just did it. But if the majority wants to change it, let's actually make it what it's intended to be and not just let anybody have a free-for-all once they pick their number.
I will speak to Counselor Caddy's comment earlier. I was one of those 4 counselors who sat directly in a row with the other 3 freshman counselors at the time, and it was difficult. Just understanding the motions at first was it was a learning adjustment, and you didn't have someone that you could turn to and say, what's the correct phrase, or did I introduce this the correct way? Those are small. Those may seem trivial things, but particularly in that first year, every aspect, the first time you do anything is both a little bit nerve-wracking and a little bit challenging because you haven't done it before. And I think it is advantageous to be seated next to someone that has that experience to say, no, this is the way you do it. But again, I'm happy to bend to the will of this body. Councilor Walsh.
As a new city councilor, it was advantageous to me to have somebody sitting near me that I could say, I'm not sure, what we're doing here, what's the proper procedure. I like the fact that it gives the president an opportunity to put a new councilor with an established councilor just for that reason alone. And so I would be in favor of just leaving the rule as is.
So I have a motion and second to amend number 29 to draw by random lot. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. I have 3 in favor, Squalia, Boschman, and Donnelly. All those in opposition. 8 in opposition. The motion fails. And Councilor Squalia, you had
And Rule 33 to be completely stricken. I don't like the requirement that city councilors must dress in business attire, that is also not clearly defined. I feel like it's an arbitrary rule that could be selectively enforced.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and second to strike Rule 33. Speaking on the motion, Councillor Donovan.
I seconded it. I haven't heard anyone got in trouble, but years past, there was a particular counselor that would wear a sweatshirt and jeans to meetings, and I didn't think that was appropriate. I wasn't here when you instituted the dress code, but to a point. Now, I understand there are certain circumstances where people might come to a meeting directly from work and they might not be dressed up. It's not all the time, but I don't think people elected our officials to tell them how to dress to come to a meeting. I would expect business attire to be appropriate, but I never liked the way that particular person dressed years ago in jeans and a sweatshirt, continuously. Not work clothes, just less than casual. And I think that the elected body deserves better. So I don't know how we regulate it. I think there should be a standard, but I don't know how to set the standard. I think it should be on the books, and if there's a problem and it's not representing our city in a professional way on a regular
Dave
basis,
LeBlanc, 1255, please. Dave LeBlanc, 1255.
I think that's the time somebody should and could address it.
To speak to the enforcement angle, the idea isn't, having to enforce this. This is largely self-policed. The idea is we have a dress code. It's commonly accepted as a phrase, business attire in workplaces across the country and boards across the country. There's ample examples of what to follow. And at the end of the day, in this past year since we've enforced it, in my mind, there hasn't been a single issue, and there hasn't been one person who hasn't dressed appropriately. And if there was a circumstance, I don't think it would be calling out in a public meeting. I think it would be a side conversation either after the meeting or over the phone of saying, Counselor, I think we just need to review the dress code a little bit further and reflect on what business attire means here. But I don't think we've had any issues with this body, and I think we've dressed representative of how our electorate expects us to act and conduct ourselves and appear in public. This is a workplace. Whether or not it's a conventional workplace, this is still a workplace. We represent people, and I believe that when we're appearing in public for a meeting and doing the people's work, I believe that we should dress and act accordingly. And I know my employers expect that of me. There's a time to dress casual, and there's a time to dress appropriately for business. And I think it's fairly straightforward. Councillor Walsh.
I think that this body is one that should encourage respect, not only from the public, but from each other. And I think it's a sign of respect for each other that we dress appropriately. I agree with President Kushmarek that this is a workplace. And I think that as such, we should dress as if we're going to work. And I think that business attire, although it could take many forms, I think there's a general consensus as to what that means. I don't think there's a lot of confusion about that. Thank you.
Councillor Zarella.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, business attire is a deliberately loose term because we don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of you have to have this kind of shirt and this kind of pants and this kind of coat and so on. But it's one of those terms where it's not always obvious exactly where the line is. It's only obvious when something is well short of that line, and that's what the rule was adopted to address. I haven't seen anyone come to the council in attire that I'd consider even particularly close to the line. So if it becomes an issue of selective enforcement, if someone does get the hammer brought down on them for no good reason, then we can have that conversation. But for the moment, it mostly is just so that we have a tool to use if a counselor comes in flagrantly inappropriate attire for whatever reason.
Counselor Fleming.
I believe dressing in business attire for, 6 hours a month isn't asking too much, where there are so many activities and community things going on that you have that opportunity to wear whatever you want. But in a meeting where you're on the camera, I believe business attire is appropriate.
I have a, Counselor Boschman.
I have no problem getting dressed up for the council meeting, as a full council, but if you're talking about the subcommittee meeting and you have to be dressed up, then I have a problem with that. I think we're a working community, and the subcommittee meeting is entirely different than a full council meeting when you're in front of the camera. I don't think you should have to get dressed up for a subcommittee meeting. I know, because I say that because one day I had a meeting and I was working and I forgot about the meeting, and I think Councilor Donnelly said, because I came in with a sweatshirt and I was painting and I had paint all over me, I had paint on my hand. But I just came from work and I was in a hurry to get here. So we're a working community. I can understand a full council meeting where we're all sitting around the table at Tuesday night meeting, yes, but if it's a subcommittee meeting, I don't agree. I believe we're a working class people and you should be dressed up. If you happen to come in from work, that's the way you are. That's how I feel.
Point of information.
Counselor Zerella.
I believe we actually did end up discussing that when we initially adopted the rule and did conclude that it doesn't apply to committee meetings,
Okay, as long as,
except perhaps a council as a whole committee.
right, Councilor, I got no problem.
Perhaps that was discussed, but it says during council meetings. It doesn't say specifically full council meetings.
Counselor Zerella.
A council meeting and a committee meeting are distinct meetings. We don't meet as a council when we meet as a committee.
I have a motion and second to strike Rule 33. All those in favor of striking Rule 33, please raise your hand. I have one in favor, Councilor Squalia. All those in opposition. There are 10 in opposition. The motion fails to carry. Do I have a motion to accept the rules for the year 2019?
Motion for further amendments?
I have a motion for further amendments from Councilor Zerella. Do I have a, sorry, go ahead, Councilor.
I have a few here. Most of them are fairly simple, just conforming the rules to what we've been doing, but one is a little more complex. I'm going to just pass these around. One is amend Rule 11, which is the rule on moving the question, to add after the phrase shall the main, how the current rule reads, the previous question shall be put in the following manner. Shall the main question now be put? And all further amendments or debate shall be suspended until the previous question is decided. As, sorry, I stopped passing when I started reading. As currently written, we've been using that to mean that as soon as any counselor says move the question, we have to immediately vote. It's been mentioned several times throughout the year that that doesn't seem quite right, and upon research it turns out that's not the way Robert's Rules does it, and I don't think Rule 11 was ever intended to supersede Robert's Rules in that particular way. So I am moving that first, after the phrase shall the main question now be put, we add the words or any other phrasing which makes the intent clear. That's just clerical, because we tend to say move the question, not shall the main question now be put. And secondly, after the phrase shall be suspended until, add motion for the previous question is decided. In other words, someone says move the question, then it has to be seconded, and then there is a vote which requires a 2/3 majority to close debate. And then, if it passes, we vote immediately on the main motion. Otherwise, we vote, otherwise we continue debate as normal.
I have Councillor Green.
My only question, and maybe just a point of clarification, is when we've used this, has been when there has been, back and forth debate.
Mhm.
And it's been used to kind of squander that. And when it happens to you, it's quite abrupt that happens. So I just want to make sure that if that's the purpose for moving the questions, then all debate stops.
Yes.
And we're just clarifying that more of a parliamentary procedure.
Right, so that rather than a single councillor being able to end debate on demand, the question would be put to the council whether we should end debate. And if 2/3 of the council believes that we're done and it's just 2 or 3 councillors going back and forth, then 2/3 of the council would vote to close debate and we'd be done.
Is that how it, and again, sorry, is that how it reads, that it should be done and we've just
In
never
here,
done it
yes,
that?
exactly.
Okay.
That is how Robert's rules, I want to check what section it is. It is Robert's Rules, section 16. Oh, I might have a different version here.
Councillor Green, are you?
I'm done with that
Okay.
clarification. If the amendment then is to take a vote before we stop completely. Thank you.
Councillor Caddy.
My question's for the clerk,
Okay.
because I don't know. When we adopt these rules annually, during the course of the year, can we petition to change a rule during the course of the year?
Yes.
So, Mr. President, what I see with this is, he makes some valid points with this. What I've seen when someone moves the motion, it's out of frustration because you have 2 councilors going back and forth. Finally, someone says, let's move the motion. So if we're going to make a change like this, I would rather see this go to legislative affairs and have this vetted out properly, explained properly, so everybody understands it properly before we vote on it like this.
And Councillor, I'm happy if we decide we need to either delegate this to legislative affairs or ultimately to council as a whole to discuss the rules further later this winter or spring. I'd be happy to do that. This was, and Councillor Zarella and I met to talk about this a little bit further. This was essentially clarifying, because our rules weren't consistent. Typically, we follow Robert's rules. In this case, our rules weren't entirely clear, and they didn't seem to accurately reflect what Robert's rules does. So in this case, we wanted to make it a little bit, because councillors have rightly questioned the application of this rule, and we wanted to ensure that we were following Robert's rules, and in this case, it seems like we weren't necessarily, or we just weren't, and this would make it a little bit more democratic in terms of closing debate. But Councillor Caddy, certainly if councillors aren't, this is just coming in front of us now within the past 5 minutes, if councillors aren't comfortable, by all means, then we can certainly hold this.
Sure, seeing as I have not yet received a second on my motion, I would be happy to withdraw it. You seconded the motion for further amendments, but I hadn't stated the amendment
Is
yet.
this one on the table?
This one is on the table.
No one gave me a second?
No.
Just speaking on the motion,
Sure.
even Robert's rules is a guideline, unless you really get to be, we have 2 parliamentarians here, the clerks, and you don't necessarily, we're looking at the same verse and chapter, and most of us are not attorneys. But we adopted Robert's rules. But many years ago, we did not use Robert's rules. I think it was Diamond. There was another set of rules that the council used for many years before adopting Robert's. So they're guidelines. They're not absolute, and this is how we do it until we change the rules. But it's to just have organization that we can actually get to a point of voting and not discussing forever, so.
Councillor Squalia?
I'm amenable to adjusting the rule as long as if someone moves the question, that it requires a vote of moving the question.
Councillor Gina Taylor?
I don't find it necessary to have a second reading all of the council is opposing this. What has been taking place is someone just blurts out with the question, and then debate is shut off and we vote. I could not stand that, you know? Because there's so many times then therefore that I could throw that out there because they don't want to hear one of us speak. It's just, so there should be a vote. There should be a 2/3 vote of the council to end debate. And that's all he's seeking. That's it. So I'm all for it. I think there needs to be a vote anytime you want to shut debate off. So I'm ready to vote on it now.
So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Move second.
So I have I have a motion and a second to amend Rule 11. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those in opposition? Two in opposition, Councilors Clark and Boschman. Motion carries 9-2.
Second proposal, these are actually not numbered correctly apparently, but, so ignore the rule numbers on here, but this is basically making it so that what we already do is covered under our rules. I don't have the numbers counted out, so there's going to be some extras, I think, going that way and not enough going that way. But it reads, contrary to Section 3, page 30 of Robert's Rules of Order, this edition, a member may preemptively claim the floor when next open, by silent gesture to the chair while another member is speaking. And the chair shall note that member's desire to speak in the order in which the request is received, provided, however, that this shall not entitle a member who has already spoken to claim precedence over a member who has not yet spoken, and provided further that the chair may grant precedence to a different member first if that different member desires to address a question or clarification to the member who is speaking. A member who reserves precedence in this manner may, when recognized, yield the floor to another member before beginning to speak, without sacrificing his or her right to be granted the floor immediately after that member.
Councilor,
So
we have a motion to amend this rule. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second, and then speaking to the motion, Councilor
Yes,
Zarella.
sorry, I jumped in that a little.
That's all right.
So the basic idea here, it sounds complicated, but the basic idea is, A, we do what we've already been doing. Because currently Robert's Rules, which governs unless our rules say otherwise, says that you can't claim the floor until the member who has the floor has relinquished it. In other words, it would be a mad race for the next person to claim their right to speak as soon as someone stops speaking. What we've been doing, which has worked perfectly fine, is someone makes a gesture like this to President Kushmerek and he makes a mark on his paper and then calls on people in order. That's basically all the first paragraph is doing, is codifying that that's what happens. The second paragraph is just saying, because I know this came up at least twice this year, that if you're called on because you're next in order and you know that the person who's waiting after you has something to say that's more directly relevant than what you're going to say, I could say, I would like to yield first to Councilor Fleming. And then Councilor Fleming could speak, and then I would immediately receive the floor again afterwards, rather than having to go to the back of the line.
And just to speak to that, there's been a couple of times where I know we've sat around and said, well, we don't have the context. This decision was made 20 years ago, and no one knows why this is done. And I look at Councilor Donnelly or Councilor Caddy, and they're both out there waving their hand, and they're 12th on the speakers list, but they both know exactly why the decision was made. They may have been part of that decision at the time, and we're sitting there with the answer at the table, and it would be nice to be able to bring that person in to answer it without circumventing everyone else. And at times, you could have the councilor who has the floor saying, I'd like to hear from Councilor Donnelly, who clearly has the answer to this or can provide the context that I'm looking in order to be able to move the conversation forward. So I think this makes a lot of sense, and at times we've had to be somewhat flexible in order to allow for those things. This is just simply kind of codifying a more logical progression of that discussion. Councilor Green.
Again, just for clarification, as I read it, doesn't this clearly outline that
and we'll just use Counselor Boishman as an example, who maybe at sometimes speaks 2 or 3 times on the particular matter. And isn't this saying that whoever is running or proceeding over the meeting has the right to call on a counselor who has yet to speak before hearing Counselor Boishman or whoever talk for the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or maybe even 5th time? Let's be honest.
Counselor, I believe that's the correct interpretation. Additionally, that's typically the way I try to, if there's a new counselor who hasn't spoken, who's raised their hand, I try to then bump them to the next person on the list ahead of anyone else who hasn't already, or who has already spoken, if that makes sense. Counselor Zarella.
I just wanted to clarify, yes, that is correct, and that is actually required under the rules unless we adopt a rule to the contrary. That any counselor who has not yet spoken takes precedence over a counselor speaking for the second or subsequent time.
Counselor Donnelly.
I've been in the seat, so I understand. I think you've been doing that. So are you comfortable with this?
I am comfortable with this, and I think the second clause in here also actually just makes this a little bit easier for us to move the conversation forward when someone's in their seat trying to wave their hand saying, I have the answer to help us move this forward. So,
You're comfortable, I'm comfortable.
Counselor Swelling.
I like having this in the rules, and I particularly like the second portion where a counselor may yield the floor first to someone they know can answer that question right away and, you know, kind of solve all the questions of other counselors. And it also allows the chair of the meeting to kind of do that same thing. So I like it.
Counselor Boishman.
I have no problem yielding the floor if someone hasn't spoken, none whatsoever, and I agree on it. You never heard me complain. But what I do have a problem, that if you say you want to yield the floor to Melissa to the right, the counsel to my right, and then you come back and then you shut the meeting off and Marcus or I or Joe Caddy can't speak, and that's where I have the problem. That's where I really feel that it's not right.
Counselor Fleming.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. Will this also apply if a counselor is just saying the same thing in different words? You know, sometimes people speak 2 or 3 times, they're basically saying the same exact thing they said the first time they spoke, and then they just reword it a little bit more. So will this apply to that as well?
Point of information?
Counselor Zarella.
This does not alter the rules on how often a counselor may speak in general at all, nor does it alter the rules of when or how we close debate. So it would not affect either of the 2 counselors' concerns.
Counselor Tina Taylor.
To address Counselor Boishman's question, if there is a counselor who has not yet spoken, and counselor comes out and says, make a motion to approve, someone says second, president or the chair of that committee can interject and not accept the motion and say, I still have people who want to speak. And ask the person who made the motion if they would kindly rescind it to allow the rest of the council to speak. That happens all the time. The way I run my committee meetings, if I still have people's hands up before a vote is taken, I always try to get them in before we actually make the vote, as long as you get your hand up before that. But again, some of this is up to the discretion of the chair too, so. But that's how that gets rectified, is if there's a list of people waiting, someone cuts in and makes a motion, I would hope that any of the chairs here or president would, and they have, interject and say, wait a minute, we've got other people who want to speak first, will you please kindly yield your motion? And I believe 10 out of 10 times councilors have agreed to do that. There's no reason not to. So.
I have a motion and second to amend. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. Motion carries.
All right, motion for another, I've only got 2 more here, I promise. Just pass these down. This, again, ignore the rule number. When a committee of the council as a whole is called, it shall, though bearing the name of a committee of the whole, be conducted per the rules governing what Section 52 of Robert's Rules refers to as informal consideration, and not per the rules governing a committee of the whole. I'll wait on a second before I try to explain.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second. Speaking to the motion, Councilor Zarella.
So, again, this mostly codifies what we already do, because technically, if we were to consider our council as a whole meeting to be a committee of the whole under the rules, first of all, it would have to have a separate chair. President Kushmerek could not chair it. Second, as we do in fact do, we'd have to have the committee of the council as a whole refer to the council for a confirmatory vote. By taking it under informal consideration, first of all, it allows President Kushmerek to continue to preside when we've got a council as a whole. And secondly, it allows the vote of the council as a whole to be considered a vote of the council. We don't have to then gavel out the committee of a whole, gavel in the full council, and have another vote with another debate about the thing we just discussed. It just simplifies our procedure. The reason for having a full committee of the whole, as per the rules, would be if we had a much, much larger body with much more complex rules. Informal consideration accomplishes all the goals of a council as a whole committee as we currently use it, but also reduces the red tape surrounding it.
Councilor Donnelly.
I really can't recall when we had this issue. And I know there's times when how often does this come up?
Councilor Zarella.
It's come up several times this year alone. We've had council as a whole committee meeting to discuss some particularly contentious issue, and the reason we do it in committee of the council as a whole is because that allows for unlimited debate, whereas in a full council meeting there's a limit to debate. But then we vote as a council as a whole, and either we immediately gavel in a special meeting of the full council later that night and vote on it again, and usually people debate it again when the motion to adopt the recommendation of the committee is proposed, or we do it at the next regular council meeting where, once more, we debate the same issue with the same people a second time, which serves no useful purpose except for all of us to revoice the same arguments we made the first time.
Councilor Scalia.
I'm concerned with adopting this rule. I kind of like the way that it is now, as all the votes of all the committees are done in the full council. And there's a clear record, and anyone that only watches at, our constituents at home that only watch the full council meeting can still see all the votes taken within the full council. Even when we vote on we vote on committees, we're still taking that vote in the full council.
Councilor Walsh.
I don't think this, what Councilor Zarella is proposing is changing much of anything. It's just sort of taking out the red tape, which I think I'm all in favor.
Councilor Caddy.
So I think I could go either way with this, but other councils tell me if I'm wrong. I can remember when I first got here, I can remember how in business, when you have something to do, you do it. I can remember coming to the council and seeing how slow things go. But then it kind of dawned on me that in city government or government, you don't realize how, when you make a decision on something, how it affects so many other people. And sometimes, unless something's before us as council as a whole, unless it's like time sensitive, where what usually happens in that case is we adjourn the meeting, we have a council meeting, and then we vote on it. But I'm saying sometimes it's good when you're making decisions to slow it down a little bit, just kind of, because you don't realize how many people you affect at the time. Again, I could go either way with this, but I kind of like the way we have it.
Councilor Scalia.
Another point to add, we require to allow public comment in full council meetings, but we aren't required to allow public comment in any committee meeting. And not only that, but a lot of constituents only know to speak or attend full council meetings. So they might, they might come to a council meeting expecting to be able to talk about it, but it's already been decided, or it's already been voted on, and now they feel like their voice is no longer relevant. And
Councilor Zarella.
To clarify, if we were to adopt this, because we would then be treating it as a meeting under informal consideration rather than a committee of the whole, it wouldn't actually be a committee meeting. It would simply be a special session of the full city council under a different set of rules. And therefore, any rules that we have adopted relating to public comment would still apply. All the same notice requirements as a special session of the city council would still apply. But I would be perfectly happy to amend my motion to include a statement expressly noting that public comment shall be allowed at such meetings.
Councilor Di Natale.
I'm on the fence what I want to say. I can't recall how many times we have expressed that committee meetings public can attend and speak at. If I ever have people in the audience that want to speak, they speak. And the issue is they just don't come, okay? That's it. We advertise these things up the wazoo, and people don't come. And that's their choice. So I just want it understood out there that you can't come to a committee meeting and speak. I mean, all of our committee meetings, like for public works, for public safety, you can't have those meetings without the residents there that are affected by it. Because it's usually involving either their property or a street they live on, and we usually don't act on those things unless they're there to talk about it. So I like the way we've been doing things, because we have had several council as a whole committee meetings this year because of hot button items that we've had. And in order for it to go to council as a whole, it has to go to full council first on the agenda. We then as a council move it to council as a whole. That meeting where we move it is a regular city council meeting that the public should know of all meetings they can come and speak at. And when they do come, we tell them, this will be discussed in full at X meeting set at a later date that you can come to and speak at. We say it all the time. So I like the way we've been doing things. And I think, I don't know who said it earlier, and I'm not insinuating the council on my left thinks there's a problem, but I just don't see any need to change this. Just keep doing what we've been doing. When we have concerned constituents at a full council meeting that an item's going to go to committee, we tell them, the council president is very good at this. We will be discussing this at a future meeting that you will be allowed to come to and speak at, and they always come. I mean, we cannot expect to get every single person who's invested in something to come to a meeting. You can advertise it 600 ways till Sunday and tell them 15 different times that you can come. They have to come. If they don't come, it's not because they don't know. Thank you.
Councilor Squally.
I'd just like to add, from the lens of us counselors, it's, sometimes it's easy to say, well, we'll just decide it all at the committee of the whole. But from constituents, it's not so simple. It's not, when we've been doing this for a while, you understand, it goes to committee and then it comes back to the council. But for constituents, they go to the full council meeting. Most constituents don't go to committee meetings. I go to the committee meetings and most people aren't there. People watch the regular council meeting and they attend the regular council meeting. That's where they expect the rules to be voted on and to be able to speak. And even just being able to, when it appears on the agenda, they might first hear about it that time. And so to be able to come back and see it again, it just allows for more transparency and, like Councilor Caddy said, a little more time for everyone to understand what's going on and ask questions.
I'm comfortable either way here. I think the intent is largely, though, 99% of the time when we have a council as a whole committee meeting, the council meeting then immediately follows it. So we refer it in one meeting to a council as a whole, we run council as a whole, and then we adjourn council as a whole and move into council and then vote on the committee. Or we then hold a special meeting of the city council to vote on that singular item, which is the committee report. So I think what Councilor Zarella is proposing is simply, should we eliminate the extra step of having to file, notices for a second meeting that's largely procedural, and save ourselves an extra 10 minutes. I don't think the public is missing an opportunity there. I think it's typically just the extra step that we inflict upon ourselves. If we feel more comfortable with that, by all means. I don't think anyone stands to win or lose based on this in terms of transparency or public accessibility or council debate. I think this is truly just a how do we want to conduct it, and what's easiest for this body. Councilor Caddy. No, Councilor Di Natale.
So what you're proposing is to cut out the red tape. There wouldn't be a notice that would go out to the public about that follow-on meeting after the council as a whole committee does its business? It would just...
That would be the meeting.
That would be the meeting. Done.
Yes.
Okay, so where I was going, my earlier comment is, all the work we do is either at the first meeting before it gets referred, or the subsequent council as a whole committee meetings that we have. We may have one, we may have 5. That's where all the debate takes place. That last meeting where we public, at that point, if a resident comes, it's kind of a moot point at that point, because we've already had multiple meetings to discuss it in public. And that was my point earlier of, I've never seen an issue come to me in 11 years where someone has said, I didn't have a chance to speak at the council as a whole committee meeting. They have had opportunities. There are multiple opportunities, because everything gets publicly posted. If it's a public meeting, the public can come, and there has never been an instance where the chair, the president, has denied someone the right to speak. Never. At least in my tenure. So if this is just largely procedural on its face, then I'm all set with it, because I don't think it's going to make a difference, really. The work gets done at that initial council meeting and then subsequent committee meetings after. That last meeting really is just a formality.
Do you need more? Okay. I have a motion and Councilor Caddy.
So I remember when we created the council as the whole meeting. I don't know how many years ago it was. But the reason for that was the open meeting laws. The prevalency of the open meeting laws. And I'm probably more guilty than anybody here, because when I hear something on the table and it goes to finance or it goes to legislative affairs, I'm not on finance, I haven't done legislative affairs. So I'm the one who asked to have it go to the council as a whole, so I get the opportunity to speak freely. So if we were to stop sending something to the council as a whole, it goes to legislative affairs and finance, it's coming back to the council. A committee meeting is a committee meeting. I still want to contend. If you have a council of a whole meeting, we can have a council meeting right after, or we can wait another 2 weeks. And don't forget, that happened with the marijuana dispensaries, with the church people that came out very upset because they, as Councilor Squire said, they just maybe weren't paying attention. They didn't understand the process that we go through. And those people came in here, and they were mad, and they were very upset. So, again, slowing this down, I think, you're not, like you said, it's going to 10 more minutes out of our time. We represent the people of Fitchburg. Let's give them the opportunity to be heard.
Councilor Zarella.
I absolutely understand Councilor Caddy's concerns. My only 2 points would be, first, that at least as long as I've been paying attention, since I've been on the council and for a ways before then, I can't recall any time when any councilor actually changed their vote, when any councilor who voted in favor at the committee of the whole voted against at the on the motion to approve the recommendation of the committee of the whole, or vice versa. And secondly, the reason I thought of this was less to save the 10 minutes and more to save the few times that I recall this year when it hasn't been 10 minutes, when it's been, we have hours of debate at council as a whole, and then we have the same debate repeated to adopt the recommendation of the council as a whole. And no one makes new arguments, no one makes different arguments. They just say, as I said at the council as a whole meeting, I would like to reiterate that. And everyone does it, I've done it. I'm not singling out anyone. But ultimately, it winds up being our actions in that regard, wind up being a waste of time. Hearing from the public is never a waste of time, but hearing ourselves say the same things over and over again, that's a waste of our time and the public's time.
I have to say, Councilor Caddy, I think, has swayed me here in that while it's largely it's rarely exercised, if we so choose, we have the flexibility to then we could have a council as a whole on a Wednesday night and give ourselves to the following Tuesday before we vote on it. Allows that opportunity, if we so choose, as a body, to make our decision as a committee and to sit on it and let it breathe before voting on it. Now, that's rarely needed, and I can't tell you, I can think of an opportunity right off the top of my head where that's required. But once we move in that direction, we then no longer have that as an option. And I think, as Councilor Caddy has stated, that can be a valuable option to this body if we ever so choose to exercise it. And I think in some cases that may be more valuable than saving the 5 or 10 minutes at the end of a meeting. So for that reason, I would be hesitant to vote on this amendment.
I would seek unanimous consent to withdraw my motion.
Second.
A motion and second. I don't know that we.
It's just if anyone, if no one has an objection.
Yep. If there are no objections, motion is withdrawn. You have a one further proposal. Let me pass this around too. Members who do not sit on any given committee may attend meetings of such committee in their usual place as councillors, but may pose questions only to the chair and may only be recognized once on a given matter for not more than 5 minutes, provided, however, that at the sole discretion of the chair, the member may retake the floor to answer whether his or her questions have been satisfactorily addressed and to clarify them if they have not been. I'll wait a second. Can we, Councilor Zarella, before I have you, can I get a motion and second?
Second.
Can we refer this to legislative affairs? We have a recent opinion from the AG's office.
All right, withdrawn.
Would you like to make a motion to send this to the Legislative Affairs Committee?
Yes, please.
Is that
Second.
fine for us to do this in this format? Or would you prefer a petition to be submitted?
For tracking
How about
purposes,
council?
we'll need a petition.
Since we're a council.
So we'll have this, Councilor Zarella, if you could submit this in petition format, just so for tracking purposes and so it can work its way into the council for the next agenda. We'll then refer it to the Legislative Affairs Committee. Unless, of course, we want it as council. All right.
Thank you.
And I'm not certain if this is the appropriate time to make this motion, but I would like to move that we create an ad hoc committee on rules to be composed of 3 councillors appointed by the president and to have responsibility for reviewing the council bylaws and recommending technical and clerical amendments for the purpose of harmonizing our rules with our practice.
I have a motion and second to create an ad hoc rules review subcommittee. Speaking on the motion, Councilor Zarella and I quickly went through the rules, and there were a number of things, just anything from a couple of spelling errors to a couple of inconsistencies and contradictions. Nothing egregious enough to cause concern, but at some point, every year it's usually we're reviewing just a rule or two that may be relevant to this year or that we want to establish. But I think it's been some time since we've had a comprehensive look of making sure are the rules numbered correctly? Are they properly organized? Is the language consistent throughout? Do we have the same tone and structure? throughout the rules, just to make it a little bit easier and make sure we're correct, and then again, that we're not contradicting ourselves with anything. And I think it's good to undertake this kind of comprehensive review. I don't think the goal here is to submit any real new changes at this point, simply to clarify and update our current rules. Speaking on the motion, Councillor Squalia.
I would like that, make sure that if we do form this committee, that all committee meetings are advertised to all councilors, that all councilors may attend. And I'm concerned with the number of the proposal. With only 3 councilors, that means that only 2 councilors are needed to allow it. I would like to see more like 5, or I would like to see, frankly, a whole council.
Councillor Zarella.
First, this would be a committee of the council, so it would be subject to all the same notice requirements and open meeting laws and whatnot. So that is not a concern. The number is small because this is intended to be largely technical in nature. This isn't to recommend changes like the ones I've been recommending today, or like the ones you have, Councilor Squalia. This is solely to tidy up some of the language, so it's more like the Committee on Records. That's where I pulled the number 3 from. It is not going to be proposing substantive changes to the way we do business in the council.
Councillor Zarella, to add to your point, that would require, I guess, at this point, probably a petition like the one going to legislative affairs that you've proposed previously. Mm-hmm. Councillor Squalia.
I would just like to note it wouldn't be like the Committee on Records, because the Committee on Records have never actually formally met, or they don't make any official decisions other than accepting the rule by the chair of the Records Committee at the meeting.
Councillor Green.
I just want to bring up, this would be strictly just for parliamentary procedures, like a checks and balances of just going through the bylaws or the rules of business of council to tidy up if there's things that no longer apply or the wording isn't quite he, she, they, just to button it up so that then whoever is on that committee can bring it back to council and say, these are the changes, parliamentary changes that may need to be made, and we're asking for a vote either in favor or against that. Correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that is correct. It would be solely to clarify any typos, inconsistencies, outdated language, nothing that actually governs the way we do business would be getting changed, except in the case where a rule that was drafted a long time ago is substantially inconsistent with the way we have been doing business consistently.
Thank you.
That's the only purpose.
Councillor Di Natale.
So if someone wants to propose a rule change, it would not go to this committee.
Correct. This would be a one-time ad hoc committee that would be responsible for essentially updating and making current our existing rules and putting it back before this body to discuss it.
3 is a very good number, then. Thank you.
Councillor Donald.
Well, we can't have a committee of 1, so that's why we need 3. And I hope Councilor Zarella is on the committee.
What does that mean?
So I have a motion and, do I have a second?
Yep.
I have a motion and second to appoint an ad hoc committee consisting of 3 councillors to update and review our existing rules. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those in opposition? 1 in opposition, Councillor Squalia. Motion carries. Do I have a motion to accept the rules as amended?
So moved.
I have a motion and second to accept 2019 as amended. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those in opposition? Motion carries as is unanimous. 2019, order setting dates of regular meetings of the City Council for the year 2019. I have a motion and second to accept 2019.
I haven't seen the dates proposed.
Councillor, it was included in the packet and the warrants that came out with us.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. Motion carries. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, councilors.
Thank you, Mr. President.